collective. I suspect the clarity that comes as we're on our healing path is more of a threat to the enemy than the healing itself. I mean, spirit loves who spirit loves, regardless, healed or unhealed. So when we're continuing on that path that does not provide clarity, we are bringing certain things on ourselves, even if it's as abstract as continuing the curse or sins from from past generations. Without clarity, it is impossible not to judge others, even if we don't know we're doing it. It's an impossibility. Consider this. Let's take into perspective for a minute the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and just for the sake of this argument, let's not talk about whether this was an actual uh, events or whether it's allegory. But let's think about what happened here. Here we are, we have Adam and Eve, and they're told not to, everything else they can eat, everything else in the garden they can eat, but they were not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Think about that. They're not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So they do. And according to the story, um, God comes back to the Garden of Eden and he's looking for Adam. And he says, Adam, where are you? And he's hiding behind a rock or something. And he said he was hiding because he was naked and he was ashamed. And God said, well, who told you you were naked? And, the story goes, he goes to blame the woman and all of this. And then they're banned from the garden. But think about what actually happened here. Adam and Eve were naked the whole time. It was Adam's judgment that being naked was wrong. It was his condemnation of being naked that made it wrong. I suspect that that curse that happened there, that thing that died in the Garden of Eden in them, was their purity in this sense, in the sense of not being in a position to call things wrong or right. That was not within their purview to determine what was wrong or right. That was strictly within God's purview. That was strictly God's authority to determine what things are right or wrong. And here we have this church that's supposed to be from God making all these determinations about what's right or wrong. That's what got Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden. The thing about this, though, is, and I have noticed this, and I'm not making a judgment here, I'm making an observation, and I need you guys to really pay attention to the difference. I'm not making a judgment, we're making an observation here. So what I have observed from this thing they're calling the church, which there's nothing in the Bible that I've seen that talks about a building being a place where God is housed or where God lives, other than uh, before the veil was torn, before we could go directly to God. But since that veil was torn, I've never seen anything in scripture that would suggest that God resides in a building. What I have observed is it appears that in this thing we're calling church or Christianity, um, they don't know what else to do other than to judge people. It seems like that's what they think their purpose is to worry about what other people are doing and to make assessments about what's right or wrong that other people are doing. And the scripture is clear about this. God says, well, if you think you're doing wrong, then you're doing wrong. And that's reasonable. But there's nowhere in scripture, anywhere, where I've seen where God has given the church, Christianity, or any person a mandate to determine whether someone else is doing something wrong. It's astounding to me that this spirit of judgment is so strong in this organization, which claims to follow a book that says do not judge. And at the core of all of this, this judgmentalness, this thing we're calling the church is inundated and saturated with a spirit of gossip, which is connected to monitoring spirits. And the reason I'm saying this is because what I have observed is the folks who are involved with this thing don't seem to have any control over being judgmental. Um, and for the most part, it has become so normalized. The arrogance and the hypocrisy has become so normalized in this church, or this thing they're calling the church, which again, I don't think that this thing they're calling the church is what God is calling the church. Um, but it's become so normalized that it doesn't, they don't even realize that spirit that is dripping off of them. Now, that being said, don't misunderstand me. This is not just something that happens in the church. This is something that seems to be on mankind in general. But my point is that church is supposed to be that place of refuge. The church of God, the Spirit of God is supposed to be a place of refuge in a world of judgment. When you know, Christ was here, one of his main themes was I'm not here to judge. I can, but I'm not here to judge. That's not what I'm here for. Christ was a place of refuge. Christ was a place you could go to and not be judged. But that is not the case with this thing we have today that's called the church. It seems like they think that their primary purpose, their primary goal is to judge people. And the most interesting thing about it is, as clear as it is that that spirit of judgmentalness, that spirit of gossip, that spirit of monitoring spirits is so heavily on them, and they don't even see it. Collective. I shared a story where this gentleman is talking scientifically about what happens to the brain when a person starts looking inwardly, when a person starts questioning the way they think and starts questioning the way they respond, starts questioning the way they react, starts questioning their own beliefs. And what science has discovered is that there's a part of the brain that literally starts growing, and the entirety of the brain starts growing. This is not a what someone might call spiritual, or what somebody might call psychological. This is a physiological, scientific result from looking inward that occurs. There is a growth that occurs when we start looking inward. And um, this whole ideal of looking outward that is being perpetuated by this thing we're calling the church is not brought to us by the Spirit of Christ. It is brought to us by the Antichrist. So, collective, I'm urging you, even if you don't quite understand or know how to look inward, make that decision within yourself that you're going to do that. And when you start on that, God will find you. God will bring you to him. Spirit, source will bring you to him and will lead you on a path toward clarity. And when you start on that path toward your healing and begin to get that clarity, then that's what brings the healing to the world.
Peculiar Things is available on audiobook, Kindle, and paperback.